I'm going to talk through a bit of a summary of the breathing unit for Year 7. First of all, we looked at the respiratory system, and this is all of the organs that we find in our chest. We can really easily see some of those organs, and there are a few that are a bit more difficult to try to label. So let's start with the top one. This pipe here is called the trachea. The trachea has another name, and the other name is called the windpipe, because it brings air into the body. And as we know, the trachea is part of what we call the airways, so it's covered with little hair-like structures called cilia that waft, and those cilia we know waft mucus. So these airways have a mucus lining, and the mucus traps dirt and bacteria to stop it from going down into the lungs and causing infections. We can also see that we've got these little stripy bits drawn on the trachea, and there's something called cartilage. Cartilage is what your ears and your nose are made of. So it's a sort of firm, rigid structure, and actually the cartilage in the trachea, we say they're made of, they're not full rings, but they're sort of C-shaped rings like that, going all the way down. So it's like lots of little C's going all the way down, and that holds the trachea open. We make our journey down. The trachea then splits into two tubes, and that's each of these here. So this is as if it's your own body. This would be the right side, and this would be the left side. I know it seems backwards, but it's as if it's your own. And those are the bronchi, and there are two tubes. So I'm going to write two bronchi. Singular is bronchus, plural bronchi. And because these are airways again, just like the trachea, it means that we have cilia inside, little hair-like structures wafting away. And what do they waft? They waft the mucus, which traps what? Bacteria and dirt to prevent infections in the lungs. And these tubes, the two bronchi, they lead to the smaller tubes. And those smaller tubes are these ones here. These little, so you've got your two bronchi here, and these smaller tubes, they're called bronchioles. Exactly the same as your bronchi, but they're just small ones. Those bronchioles lead on to other little structures here, which actually the label is over here, and these are the air sacs, or the fancy name is alveoli. Singular is alveolus, plural is alveoli. We can also call them air sacs. And these air sacs, there are billions of them. Well, maybe millions, say millions. There are millions of them. They're very tiny. They're so tiny that in fact the wall of them is just one cell thick. Very tiny indeed. And what they do is they provide a large surface area, because there's loads of them. We'll look at why that's important later on. Here we've got a little close-up. It looks like a bunch of grapes, but each of these little circles represents one alveolus. So here we've got a close-up of the alveoli. The other labels that we've got, this here in the bottom is called the diaphragm. It's a funny spelling. diaphragm with a G. And it's a sheet of muscle. And that sheet of muscle changes shape. We can see in the diagram it's sort of, we say that's dome shaped, like this. But it changes from dome shaped to flattened when we breathe in and out. So when we breathe out, it's dome shaped, and when we breathe in, it's flattened. And we'll look at why that is later on. These are the main structures. The other things that we've got here are the ribs. The ribs are for protection because the lungs are very delicate, and they form a sort of cage around the lungs to protect them. And also, remember, the heart is sort of about here as well, so the ribs will protect the heart. There are two other labels which are a bit strange, and they're called the outer pleura and the inner pleura. Anything that's sort of to do with pleural, that means to do with the lungs, and this is just an outer membrane holding the lungs in place and an inner membrane of the lungs. We'll add those on, but you don't really need to know those as much as the other ones. So we've got the outer membrane or pleura, and this one's the inner sort of lung membrane or pleura. So, a bit of a recap. What do we need to know about the respiratory system, the structure? We have our trachea, we can call it the windpipe. It's got cilia which waft mucus away from the lungs, and it's held open by C-shaped rings of cartilage. What else is really important? Well, we've got our tubes that lead off from the trachea down to the rest of the lungs, to bronchi that have the same structure internally with cilia and mucus, and these lead to the smaller tubes which are the bronchioles. The bronchioles then lead to the tiny little air sacs which we call alveoli, and there are millions of them. They're very small and they give the lungs a large surface area. And finally, we need to know what the diaphragm does. And the diaphragm is our little sheet of muscle that moves sort of up and down from dome shaped to flat as we breathe in and out. And we'll look at the detail of that in the next video.